Welcome to Watercolor Wednesday. My name is Kathy Futrell, and we are here at the Church of the Palms in beautiful Sarasota. And today we're going to do another lesson on two-point perspective. I thought I would explain a little bit more about perspective. Now, we have linear perspective, which is the mathematical means of determining angles. We have what is called an aerial or atmospheric perspective, and that is to describe, I use the example of the Blue Ridge Parkway. And the mountains in the distance have an atmospheric perspective. And if you look at the early Renaissance paintings, you know what you will see? You will see, even in Leonardo's, his Mona Lisa painting has turned a little brown, but it used to be more blue. Most of those, they're faded. The color has lost when it goes back into space. So, for example, right here, let's put this image a little higher here. Is that better? You can see the whole thing. So we also have another kind of perspective called isometric, and that is a computer generated. It was developed by the Orientals, and beautiful designs are made, but each side is equal to each side, and so there's no diminishing of those cubes. They just are cubes in space which don't have that depth. So it's still showing perspective because of the way they're drawn. In a landscape, what you have are several things that help you with atmospheric and linear perspective. One is size. So a big tree that's in the foreground is going to dominate over small trees that are in the background. Okay, you're going to diminish in space, like this road eventually goes away. You have the idea of overlap. If this is in front of all of that, you know it's closer to you. Things like clouds are smaller on the horizon and larger at the top, as this little illustration is showing here. And the point is that we have foreground, middle ground, and background in landscapes in particular. So overlap, placement, and size are all important in perspective. This illustration, thank you. This illustration is for the perspective of, which creates the illusion of three-dimensional or as a two-dimensional height and width in a picture. So here we have the eye level, which is also called the horizon line. This is for one-point perspective. That means that this surface is flat in front of you. Okay, this front, like a door, would be here on this little box. And so we see only one side. It could be over here, and it would do the same thing to this vanishing point. This is another illustration of one-point vanishing point, and this is we call it the railroad track, or the road disappears, the sidewalk disappears. These could be telephone poles. These could be trees. The point is, here's your eye level, and things seem to diminish. When you are standing here, this represents simply your eye level. So this is how we explain one-point perspective. In this particular illustration right here, we're looking at the interior of the room. But if you were to continue all these lines on the floor, this is a tile floor, they would go straight to this, just like the ceiling would go straight there. And the walls would go, the lines of the floor would go straight there. So that is explaining a little more about one-point perspective. What we're going to deal with today is a very simple two-point perspective. And with, let me just show this. So most buildings that we do are two-point perspective, which means that if we go in this direction, somewhere out here, way out here, is going to be a vanishing point. So this is going to be, there's going to be an eye level. Usually if you are standing up, oh my goodness, hola, welcome. If your eye level is right here on the door, if you are standing up, you're usually 3/4 high to a door, right? So I often use that as a frame of reference when I'm trying to determine where's my eye level. If I'm sitting down, it's going to be a little lower to the door. Not that I draw a line to determine how to draw my building. I see it. I often do what is called, I hold the ruler up to my building. I'm sitting in front of the building. I hold my ruler up and I adjust the ruler to what the angle is. And then I lay it on my paper and I go, oh, okay, and then it helps me see it. So that is what's going on when we're dealing with perspective. So the lines of this building are going here, and notice that this is the corner. So everything in this direction would go to that vanishing point. Oh, I'm so glad I have all these different colors. Oh, I should use a different color. Okay.
Can I ask you a
Yeah, that was,
question?
so everything goes to that vanishing point by looking at it this way. So here it is as an illustration, all right, and we have boxes now, and what we start with is a line, and we plot our points, and then we can draw the box, and it looks right. Now this gets a little more complicated when you have rooftops or you have box flaps, but I think we're just not paying attention to that right now. There's a logic behind linear perspective. That's all there is. And so what I'm going to do for you right now is this is the painting that we're going to make. And this is our handout sheet that we used last week to do our pots along this ledge. And we did the reference from Selby Gardens. So we were thinking about John Singer Sargent. This is a reference to John Singer Sargent, who was an artist of the early 1900s, and he used daring compositions. We're going to keep that in mind. He used transparent watercolor washes. He worked with lights and shadows. We're going to do the same here. We are going to do a two-point perspective. We're going to first draw, we're going to work with transparent washes, we're going to build our values, and we're going to concentrate on lights and shadows. So this being the painting that we plan to do, I think that we're going to start with looking at the reference of the bench. If you need a ruler, then you should probably get a ruler and use that. I'm just going to slide this, since I'm not painting right at this moment, so everybody can see my paper and we don't worry about the paint set right now. I'm going to do a quick sketch, and I'm going to do my painting vertical. I will begin with roughly where I think that my bench should be. It appears that my bench line is not a straight, it is not a straight line. My photograph shows that the bench angle does do a little bit of this. Now it's closer over here, and I need to cut it off. I don't want to go too far from the edge of my paper. So is my pencil line showing up?
Yes.
Okay. Now I don't really see this edge in the photograph, but I know that the bench is finished here, and I can kind of do, this is all I want to do right now is a quick little sketch, and then I'm going to true this up with my ruler. Okay, I am angling, and I'm going to test this because wow, that really goes all the way up, and this gets narrower as the bench goes into the background. It gets narrower. I may have to do some adjusting with my ruler. Okay, this line is going down, but not that much. And that's my armrest for the bench. And I'm trying to relate it to what I'm seeing. I'm adjusting a little bit already, bringing this down. It will feel a little exaggerated, but we really want to show the perspective that we see. Okay, I'm going to use this line as the line for that rail. Again, I've got a lot of pencil marks that I'm going to correct, but I'm getting this to look what I think is, I do not see this back leg here, so I won't be drawing it. I still feel like this has got to drop some more. And go back, and this also needs to come down. So again, it's a little more adjusting. Thank goodness we have erasers on the ends of our pencils. Okay, and I think I'm going to move this out a little bit more. Okay. And yes, this is watercolor. Come in. Welcome, welcome. So this arm will be much smaller because it's further away from us. And then we're going to also observe that this too will be extending with a slight delineation of size into the distance. I have some detail to add when I draw something like this because it is architectural. And there's another thing that we must be totally aware of, that all of these, now this seems to lean a little, but these are basically going straight up and down. So now I'm going to correct by maybe using a straight edge, just because it's quick and easy.
But the rear leg doesn't go straight up and down.
This one, the rear
The rear
does lean a little.
Yeah.
Yes, I've got it leaning a little, but I didn't want it to lean too much.
Okay.
Okay, and to be honest, this one feels like it's leaning in a little bit. See that? And that's just the shape of the chair. But let's say we were drawing a building. The reason I'm emphasizing straight up and down is because people lean walls, and you can't lean a wall. You know, okay. So that's the principle. But I have been, it's pointed out that I need to look at my photograph too, because when it's doing that, that's what you need to do. All right. Now, this will be a little wider than the one that I drew back here. And I'm going, just for the sake of time, I am going to begin. I'm going to plop in, whether they're right or wrong, hopefully more right than wrong. And these are going to go, I'm just thinking, do they slant a little?
Yep.
Yes, okay. Because they probably, yes, they do slant. They probably are leaning for more comfort to your back. Well, I think I got them pretty much slanting here. So do I need to slant these more? I'm going to go with the slant that I have. Okay, so I've got an edge and a space. And sometimes I do take my pencil and fill in where the negative space is, because if I don't, I'll forget where my edge is. I've got a slat with an edge. I've got a negative space. Okay, I've got a slant post here and a little bit of space, and again that edge, and then a little bit of space and another slat. I'm trying to gradually increase the size of my little posts that are on the back of the bench, because that is what's happening. And the spaces are getting a little larger. And this is a true example of what happens in perspective. All right. Oh, I hope it all works out at the end. I'll just have to adjust if it doesn't. Okay, one more side, one more space, and voila. We'll get one more little space here, and that's that. Okay. With the bench quickly drawn, I have to also get the slats in here, and I have to draw what's underneath here. We're also going to be dealing with the space, the objects around this little park bench. And actually, this is at Selby, beautiful Selby Gardens in beautiful Sarasota, Florida. Have y'all been to Selby lately?
No.
No, it's, well, look at the weather we have here right now.
Have you been to the new restaurant?
No, it just opened the day we were going in, and we already had lunch plans, but they opened about a week ago.
I thought that we got to go in.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
I haven't eaten anything.
It's so lovely this time of the year to walk around. They have part of the gardens are, of course, the new remodel, and the other part is still the lovely natural environment. There's just a little bit showing right here with that post. So here's what we have to keep in mind. If I'm thinking about things going off in distance, these lines would all be parallel to each other. Not parallel, excuse me. They seem to be parallel, but they're actually diminishing into space. So they are eventually going into a point way over here, which I'm not drawing, way out there. So I'm just putting this in. Now that didn't go straight. And then you will be able to see that, yes, each of these lines are gradually getting closer together. So if this line and this line continued, they would eventually be going away and joining at a point, okay, up here. Is that sort of obvious? The other thing is, because this is 2-point perspective, all of these lines are also doing the same thing. They're going and vanishing at a point, and that would determine where our eye level is. So the point would be out here, and a point would be out here on the same eye level. So although I didn't have to draw all of these lines, I have visualized where they would be, and I have made a determination that that this is close enough for what we're doing right this minute. All right. So even, it's interesting that every aspect of this bench would be, this line would go in that direction, and this line would go in that direction.
How did you determine how far the point
Yeah.
is?
You can't, the only way you would is to have other pieces of paper sitting out here, a longer piece, a wider piece of paper, and you would not, this would be arbitrary. Let me tell you what Durer did in 1500 to determine where those dots were. He held up a piece of glass and he drew on the piece of glass. Say that we were sitting in front of the bench and we held up a piece of glass and we used a marker and a ruler and we drew the bench, and then we could take the ruler and find where the dot is. We could put a dot out here and draw this bench to our imaginary dots. But the only way we can find that dot is to put more paper out here, and after we rough sketch it, we can make corrections by plotting where we think the dot is. I rarely do that. I draw it by eyesight, and so that's why I say, know what the rule is, and then don't bother.
And then forget it.
And that makes you feel better, doesn't it? Okay, but I feel like if you know what the rules are, then it's so much easier. Well, the same thing's going to apply here to where we have the ground. And this happens to be brick or stone. So it would help us, just getting this much done, we can follow with where the bench is and just get some lines drawn. They're going to pivot. They're going to always be a little wider here at the bottom. And what I have done in the past is I just sort of draw so that whatever's closer to me is bigger, and whatever's smaller, is whatever's further away gets a little smaller. So it has a logical effect. So I'm not making these lines very dark, but I think that if we were turning these into stones, then these stones would also go in the direction of the footing, which is, correct. And then as these go back, they really do get smaller and smaller. And of course, I'm making a mess, but you get the idea, okay? So anything, in other words, this stone right here is going to be much smaller than, say, this stone right here. And this stone right here actually should be a little bigger because it's getting closer to me. So it's a logical placement, okay? Now, what's happening in this beautiful landscape is that I think I just sort of arbitrarily put this tree at an angle, and I did that just to make this a little more frame this, because right here is this great plant. Is this still in a good position right here? Yes. Okay, yes. So you can see this plant, and it has, I wanted to say something about the International Watercolor exhibit that Larry and Sig and Jim and I went to see yesterday. And this is a painting that we saw, talking about straight lines. But this is the Florida Suncoast Watercolor Society, but this is a painting from the International Exhibition of Watercolor Artists from the American Watercolor Society. So we were questioning, is this line perfectly straight? Because we know the telephone pole was straight, and then we slid over here and said, oops, it looks like it's leaning just a little bit. So maybe it's an old building. Okay, because all buildings should have straight lines, but isn't this beautiful sense of perspective? how these buildings get smaller as they go down, and then the road curves, and we have little tiny cars down here. And look at this big old mailbox,
Is
because
that the one with the bridge in the distance?
it is.
I love that bridge.
Do you,
Well, I
where?
went to the, yeah,
Oh, you went to see it too?
I did,
Good
yeah.
for you.
That's
If
right.
anybody hasn't had a chance to go, and you're nearby, it's in Bradenton.
and you know, they say there's only one place in the United States that you can see.
This is shown right here,
I
just down the road from Sarasota, just north, in Bradenton at the Manatee Center of Art. It's only there until March the 8th as well, so this 2024. All right, so I'm going to continue with my sketch, and this plant is growing in the background in this landscape, and we're going to have lots of things to color, lots of things to add to our background and to, oh, I wish I had drawn this a little bit better. Okay, so here, the lines of the bench are a little bit sketchy still. I want to get started with my painting. Now, are you able to see my palette? Which way do I go to show? I gotta go this way a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, good. How's this? How's that?
Yeah,
Okay? About like that? So we can see all of this?
you can see everything.
Okay, so I usually pop right in here and put water on my paint just to get it all ready to go. So I'm going to be using some greens for the background, and I'm going to be using, you know what I did here? This is a white bench. Maybe I'll keep it white today, but I really like the warmth of making this a brown. I might change my mind and do that. And you can paint your bench red if you would like. You can paint it any color. Oh my goodness, I forgot, we are artists, we can do those kind of things. All right, so I usually keep my warm colors over here, and I usually keep my cool colors on this side with my blues and greens, and I don't like to use one color straight out of the palette. And so no matter what paint set you're using, I mean, I could tell you that I'm using Skip's Green, and then I'm using Cobalt Blue, and these are American Journey paints, and this is a Bumblebee Yellow, but this is my Aurelian Yellow, and I'm sorry, I painted the other day and I didn't really clean my paint box, but that's just my excuse and I'm gonna stick with it. Okay, so I get some color. Out here that's, you know, got some intensity, and then I add a little water, and then I start thinking about what is in the very background, and I'm just going to work with some light washes to start with. And this tree trunk, I want to keep the trunk a light. So I'm going to do some painting around the tree, and carefully shaping going around the bench as well, and giving it a little texture, and dry brush at the same time. This could be just suggesting where the lights are actually going to be, and maybe while I'm working with while I'm working in the yellow, I'll stick a little green in here too. There is a lot of bright color in the background here. And I don't see a lot of white popping in here, but we'll see if we have any white popping. Can everybody see what I'm doing okay? So I'm just, after you get your sketch, we're going to build some color and just work from light to dark. Now, because, it just occurred to me, shoot, every bit of this, except for that one leaf right here, is all dark. So I do not need to be careful about painting around. I needed to be careful to paint around this tree, but I don't need to be careful to paint around this plant. So I am getting just some color back here. I have my paper taped to a piece of cardboard, and usually I like to work on a foam core or a gator board, but it's so easy to travel with my cardboard, and you don't leave your good watercolor paper on anything that has acid like this does very long, but it's a temporary hold. That's all that is. So I'm mingling in a little bit of this lighter green, and this is just to suggest some foliage that's in the background. And just by giving it a little bit, while it's still wet, It's gonna help to make this read, and anything you put on this side of the tree, you need to make on this side of the tree. So all this is doing is building a little bit of a background. And I'm thinking about, I have to stop and remind myself, I am being inspired by John Singer Sargent, and there's a lot. I'll tell you, his paper is a little rougher than mine. I can see I can see more texture, but look how unafraid he is to go light and dark. So we have to start with our lights, and we're going to build. We're going to have to get dark. See this dark background? That's how the pots show up. To make this bench show up, we've got to go really, really dark back here. So we're going to build to that. I'm going to go next to the cement, and I'm going to use some blues. And I'm using a flat brush, and I'm working rather small, so I'm not using any big brushes. I scooted over here and got some of my burnt sienna to make a beautiful gray. And I happen to like that gray, but every now and then I want to stir up that gray with a little purple and maybe a little cobalt. And that makes a darker, even darker gray. Look how dark it is underneath this bench. And how dark, we're going to have to put some dark greens in behind the bench right there. So, but first I need to start with my lighter wash. You know, I'm going to switch to a little, this is a 1/2 inch brush, or is that 3/4? 3/4, just because it'll go faster. All right, so the burnt sienna and cobalt blue, burnt sienna, and a little cerulean blue. Cerulean is more of an opaque, and I'm going to add water as I work this, because I'm getting a little dark here. There's a lot of shadow, but there's also, before I get to the shadows, I've got to get that lighter value here. So from here on out, I'm just going to add water. And we'll work our shadows over that. And because I think that contour painting is very important, and that means that we go in the direction of what's happening here. This direction is like this or like this, but it is not like this, okay? It's like this. Okay. Now I've got a little spot right here I missed, and another little spot. I'm lifting a little bit as I'm bringing this around I called it a chair, the bench here, the little outdoor bench. Isn't it sweet to sit out on a pretty day like today? Why are we all inside? Okay, you know, plein air is such a privilege to be out in open air, and no wonder artists, I'm going to switch to a little tiny round brush to paint. You know, I hadn't meant to make it quite so heavy, but I think it'll be just fine. It is a very light. Now I'm going to make my bench white. And the reason is I talked to myself and I said, because I've made this darker around, I don't need to make my bench a color. It will be a white bench. That means I'm going to have to go back later and correct my drawing. All right, so there I have the plan. And I'm going to work in the background a little bit more and let this dry. So I'm bouncing back and forth. And you know, here's something I'm inclined to do, because I won't finish unless you don't mind watching for 2 hours. So I want you to paint. So I'm going to make a really nice dark with the burnt sienna and the Windsor green. Actually, that's my Viridian green. Look how dark that is. I'm going to do the spaces so you can kind of see how this bench will start to pop. And I want a different color. I'm adding blue there. I wanted a pretty color. So these spaces now, this is a little brush that's a pseudo sable. Sometimes I've been wearing this brush out. I mean really, I have really enjoyed painting with this brush. I might switch to really quickly to my synthetic brush and see. I think I'm doing okay with that. But this is, just so you see the difference. Where's that color I had? Green. Okay, here's my green. And then here's my blue. I just like that dark. I've got a nice point on this, and I really have been wearing this brush out, using it so much. So I just thought I'd see if this were easier and go faster. Not really. Okay, not really. Maybe I won't paint all of these little guys here. Okay, so this is a careful little job because I would not take the time to mask. I would just do the negative painting as carefully. Yes, I think the word carefully is in order. There's another little thing that needs to happen because these are not stripes. These are little peaks of landscape that are behind. So then I have to talk to myself and say, oh, there's a little light right here. And so we're going to take water and lift little spots because I hope everybody's watching this little trick because this is how you make and then I can interject a little yellow or another color into those lighter spots. So it is going to read like, as I start painting up here, as I start putting this background in, and this is probably what will take the most of your time today is, well, besides drawing the bench, okay, is to play with your background and do some layering that allows you to make things back here that begin to look like, nope, I want to go a little quicker in a few little spots where, and because I have the tree here, absolutely play back and forth on each side of the tree. We want this to look like, and we can get dark, dark, dark. We can start putting in some darks. And that has a lot more blue in it. And so by starting to suggest the background here and what's going on, look at how Winslow Homer also, he's got some yellows and some oranges that are going on. So sometimes making sure you have some of those other colors that can mingle in as you work. And it is not a problem with painting wet when you're trying to get the background to read as foliage and plants and leaves. Now this whole area is pretty dark, so eventually I may lose a lot of that just by putting in that dark, okay? All right. Now, I'm not going to finish this background, and this will just give you the idea of how you can start working with that. When you're painting these larger leaf shapes, then they can be done by working your brush. You know, of course, making the shape, and I just realized this one has some red on it. So whatever, I don't know which brush is clean now. This one was the clean one. Okay, so the red, if you wanted to put a little bit of color, a red orange, where I happen to see, and then of course working the green around it. So whatever's going on in your landscape, you're going to want to paint what's behind the bench before you really get to the bench. Now, the last thing after your landscape is finished, and this is still very wet to be applying shadow, I took a little bit of calligraphy to the board lines. I kept developing this background to give it detail, and then limbs and foliage, okay, and detail here. So this is what we're going to be referencing. Obviously, anytime I paint, I change because I don't really want, you know, I see things and I interpret it differently. You know, there's some trees in here. You can add those trees. I would continue with that plant, and I would keep going with some nice colors. What I want to do is show a little shadow of how I would wash, but let's let this dry, and let's let everybody get sketched and started, and then I will go ahead, after a little bit of time, I'll let this dry, and I'll come back and show you some shadows. All right, let's get to work. I thought I would have jumped in here and done just a little bit more today, but we had way too much fun. I'm sorry.
That was very tactful.
That was We had way too much fun trying to figure out our perspective, and here's a real rule of thumb, truly. It has to do with understanding perspective and then forgetting all about it. Okay, forgetting those rules and not trying to plot all those points. But as long as you see that your photograph, that your image is matching basically what's happening and that it's logical, then you just go with that flow. I'm gonna do right now, and I wish I had perhaps done a little cleanup here on my palette, is I'm gonna move some of this green and create a shadow for this walkway and also for the bench. Now the bench itself is going to have probably more lights and darks. For instance, this one side, and I want it to be more blue, I'm going to use a combination of the blue and brown and just get a pretty color for your shadow. It should sometimes read more blue, but I have a little trick that I like to do when I want the shadow to be more colorful. I start with a bit of blue. Let's see. This has already been mixed, but the shadow stops here, and I'll lift a little bit out of that. I sometimes take a blue and an orange, and I let them run together. And boy, does it make a pretty shadow color. Okay. And it's making its gray on the paper. So let's continue with that, because as this goes up, it gets a little lighter. So we're actually adding to the architecture of this little bench, and this does have, I'm trying to figure out where I walked away with, there's my pencil. Here is a line for the edge. So this is a white shape, and what I have done is just put my hand in my painting, which you should never do. Well, that's what I get for trying to rush. So we all know that never works. So I'll let that dry. But the good thing about watercolor, however, some people remind me it's also the good thing about oil. You just let it dry and then you can go right back over it. So let's see, this is my orange and this is my blue. So I'm adding just to the edge, because over here this would be a little bit of dark. So my dark is right here. I'm trying to put my hand right back into my wet paint. So this becomes a white spot. That's what I'm trying to show you. So here is going around for a shadowed edge, because let's face it, the light is going to come from here. It appears interesting at this point because there is more dark. I just think you have to read the photograph to figure out what is going on with the lights and the shadows. So here there is a shadow, and it comes at an angle and stops about right there. All right, so then this has a little softer shadow. It's very pale right here, and this is also quite pale, and I'm going to put a little bit more blue into that and a little bit of orange into that. My orange is going away, and this needs to be a little bit more blue so that it helps to read. This is very pale. So the bench is now white. And again, if you make it a different color, then you can add your shadows later. So this is going to be, I did not make this thick enough in my drawing. So this is a darker color here. And this also, I'm going to come back and do that later. Here's what I want to show you. All right, so I have some shadow that's happening here. And it's on the edge of the bench, and it's coming from some foliage. And then as it turns the corner, this is underneath here. So this is a predominant, it's an edge where this hangs over. And then this comes up. So I'm doing just the strokes, and then it comes across the bench. and some patterns. So this is like a foliage that we can see. It drops vertical and then it goes horizontal. And we're just making it look like, now, I haven't done what's on the ground, which might help for this to make a little sense. So what I'm seeing is patterns of shadows that are falling on the bench. Okay? Now, this is just suggesting that the shadows are here. Now, we have some really strong shadows that are on the ground, and we have to paint what's shadowed and dark underneath. Now here are my dark puddles for shadows, and they're much darker than what's on the bench. It's really going to help make that white bench pop right out. So a more burnt sienna, more cobalt blue, and a little bit of purple. I really like the cobalt blue in my shadow. All right, so the more water we add, the lighter that it will get. But right here, I want it to be pretty darn dark. And I let it move out and get a little less dark. And don't paint something wet right next to it. So, a lot of times it's, don't do what I do when I'm in a rush, please. Do what you know you are supposed to do. So I'm gonna just make that a little more interesting. This is a shadow that's coming from the rail on the bench. And it goes right to this, right behind. And then this has the dark all the way to about right here. And then I start seeing these plants, foliage from the tree itself. I want to add a little water. And then it starts coming out on this side. And this is really a tree. These are tree shadows. And, you know, the truth is I need the big brush to get some of this dark shape going. Now remember remember we're trying to remind ourselves about Sergeant John Singer, and what he would have done would have been very boldly applied to make the impression loose, bold, dynamic composition, and lights and shadows. And these are coming across to...
Thank you.
I knew when you were coming, you were telling me, move back, move back. So this, I want to now lighten this a little bit more and take a little orange to pop into some of my blue places. Okay, and I don't want it to be so jagged. It feels really harsh right now, but it's imitating nature, and we want it to look like it's going underneath this bench here.
So the shadows are coming from two directions.
The shadows are coming from the foliage that's, the light is coming in this direction,
Right.
but the light is filtering through these trees, and it's falling on the bench. So it's, I feel like I need to calm a lot of this down and to make this a little more solid out here. But when it goes underneath the bench, it's also, it's hitting this edge and it's going across the front of the bench as well. And then it just keeps going. Now, there's some different directions that these shapes are taking. It just depends on what's happening. Okay, I'm sitting
Pull
back.
this out a little bit.
Are you
this way.
sure you can do that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks, Jim. Jim, Sig needs you.
Do you have an extra one this week?
All right, so,
Okay.
Oh,
No, don't bother.
all right, so there's a lot of shadows over here. This is all I'm going to do for now. I don't know where the original one is. Jim, I think you have it. So the original painting, so I could show how I solved the problem here. So I carried the shadows all the way out here, and this is our finished product. However, this bench did get painted, but you can see now how to apply the shadows. There's even shadows that fall across the back here. So they're going to be, I think I can just go ahead and put them in, and I can correct what's going on in the background. So it has shadows. If you go this way and then you crawl up the side of your bench, then you will get that effect. All right, well, here, look at this one. Good luck. That's the idea. Have fun.